I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
It's a big hello to you and welcome to TGU from VLGA Connect, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, where we take a look at the local government news stories of the week in Victoria and beyond. And to help me, I have with me this week Nick Miller from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. G'day, Nick.
Hi there, Chris. G'day, Julie.
Welcome.
Hi.
And as Nick's intimated, Julie Reid's with us as well. Julie, where in the world are you this week?
Chris, I'm out of Melbourne. I've been able to escape to the Sunshine Coast.
And is it sunny?
I'm beaming in from the sunny Sunshine Coast. It hasn't been the greatest of week weather-wise up here, but I believe it's been pretty cold in Melbourne as well. So, but look, it's just nice to be away and nice to be beaming in from somewhere else.
Pretty cold, I think, is a bit of an understatement, Nick. Don't you agree?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Coldest week I think I've had in Melbourne.
Yeah, and I've been admiring, Chris, some of the beautiful work of the councils up here, particularly the Sunshine Coast Council. So big shout out to them. There's some beautiful work that's happened down on the foreshores that I've been admiring. So, yeah, great.
Lovely. All right. Might be nice to talk about some of those observations when you come back. We're going to be heading into Canberra as well later in the episode. We'll be checking in with Rhys Thomas, who's been there this week for the National General Assembly. While we're complaining about cold mornings, Tony Brownick is living it up in Tuscany, I believe, is where he is at the moment. Gathering, I think, lots of information that he will want to share with us when he comes back in a few weeks' time. Also today, Melbourne has a new Lord Mayor. Melbourne's West mayors have reacted to the airport rail link mediation outcome. There are concerns over the Suburban Rail Loop planning from some councils and some integrity issues being raised at some Melbourne councils. We've had a council CEO resignation this week, and the embattled Mayor of Townsville was back at work this week. That's just reignited calls for him to resign. So let's get into it. And firstly, some inner Melbourne councils making news. Let's start with Port Phillip, Nick, where some of the councillors there have appealed to IBAC to take a close look at, I think, what is best described as a community donation scheme where members get access to advice about councils and being a councillor, is how I take it.
Yes, look, Chris, it's an unusual setup, and it's unclear to me exactly how it works. The organisation, I think, calls itself a residents' association to some degree, and as you referred to it, it offers advice on council issues and engagement with community issues. There is a possible suggestion in structuring it in this way that there is some form of access to council information, potentially confidential information via an unofficial channel.
Right.
So on its face, what's perhaps unusual here is it's a funding organisation for funding candidates. In the last elections, it funded 3 candidates and 2 of them were elected. And what's perhaps most notable is that one of those elected is a member of this organisation, and indeed that councillor's husband is the president of the organisation. So those connections are what has generated this concern. On its face, it does present as a possible transparency issue. And looked at from another perspective, it sort of looks like, if I could make an American allusion, a little bit like those US super PACs that they have over there that have blossomed since the Citizens United decision in the Supreme Court some 10 or 12 years ago. So watch this space, possible issues, but really hard to say at the moment, just don't know enough.
That was reported in The Age, and it should be said that the group in question here have said that they've done nothing wrong. There's nothing illegal, they say, with the way they're operating and supporting these candidates, and have suggested, and I think this might apply to the next couple of stories we've got, that the issue coming up now might be politically motivated. I would just make the comment that some of these issues are coming up at a time when, of course, councils are due to go to election in just a few months. So perhaps with that that lens, two councils at the centre of integrity concerns, and I use that advisedly. The Herald Sun and the Age reporting on these issues. Firstly, the Herald Sun one is about the city of Yarra being accused of vote buying. The allegation here is that they've increased a grant to the Vietnamese community by $300,000 in an alleged attempt to buy votes from the Vietnamese community in the lead up to the election. The council, of course, says that this has been done appropriately, and it's all about recognising the 50th anniversary of the arrival of the Vietnamese people in Australia, which is coming up next year.
Yes, well, that's a certainly worthy thing to commemorate and to recognise, no doubt about that. I think what's attracted attention here is that it was very much a last-minute increase in funding.
Right.
So the original funding, I think, was proposed as 50,000, but what has ultimately been approved is funding of 350,000, and that happened at the last minute. And the suggestion is that was without details or justification. I think, Chris, it just really raises that issue again, that grants is a very fraught space. Who could forget Ros Kelly in Canberra all those years ago? And then there was another politician more recently, I think it was called Sports Rorts or something like that. Grants being done on whiteboards and can be highly politicised. So it's a matter where it is fraught and process is critical, would be my single suggestion there.
Yes, a similar situation. Sorry, Julie, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, and councils do recognise, like what Nick's talking about, the importance of process in all of this. And most councils will have a really robust process in place for determining or recommending grants. So, I have no doubt that that Yarra would have that kind of robust process in place around determining, what they recommend. But what's happened here, I think, is that it's increased on the floor at the meeting. I think the main concern is there.
Yeah. Perhaps with not a lot of detail as to why that late increase. Similarly, at Kingston, this story's been in the Age this week, where I think the crux of this is a councillor assessment panel looked at applications for grants, and the councillors ultimately resolved to provide, I think, 3 grants to groups that were not recommended by the assessment panel. One of those is a local religious group associated with Hadi Saab, the former mayor, who I think appropriately declared a conflict of interest and absented himself from the decision-making process. So again, I wonder what's the concern here, do we think?
It's a little bit. The suggestion is, as reported, that it's a last-minute change of mind from rejecting a grant of 25,000 for 1 year to ultimately a 3-year grant totaling 75,000. So again, last minute, and it was the independent panel had not approved the original grant. So that raises questions. As you say, Councillor Saab declared his conflict of interest, and there's no suggestion that he's done anything inappropriate, whatever. One thing that's interesting that came out of this was there's been a bit of debate about this organisation really was financially strong and so didn't need the money.
Right.
And interestingly, one of the participants in the debate has said, well, that's not relevant because that's not one of the criteria for assessment as to whether grants are appropriate to be given. And, that's a fair comment. That suggests that there is an understanding of the process and the criteria for funding these things. So that'll be an interesting one to see. Again, as you mentioned earlier, Chris, this is in the context of council elections being, less than 4 months away. So there is that heightened political dynamic happening.
Yes, and I suspect it won't be the last of these types of stories that we see over the coming months. Should say that the Mayor of Kingston, Jenna Davey-Burns, made a statement to The Age saying she was extremely disappointed that the integrity of the council was being called into question here. She said that the process of awarding their grants was in line with the advice that's been provided by the Auditor General in the past on those grant processes. So that's where we'll let that one sit and see whether anything more comes of it. Let's move on to a happy story this week and a sad story, a bit bittersweet. We said goodbye to Sally Capp after 6 years as Lord Mayor of the City of Melbourne. She handed the reins over to her Deputy Mayor, Nicholas Rhys, who has now become the 105th Lord Mayor of Melbourne.
Yes, Chris. Great story this week. It is sad to see Sally Capp go, but obviously, she moves on, and Nicholas Rhys now has been sworn in as the 105th Lord Mayor of Melbourne. So fantastic news, and well done to Nicholas Rhys, Councillor Nicholas Rhys. He was actually elected as a councillor in 2016 and was obviously Deputy Lord Mayor in late 2020. And he was really the driver of that post-pandemic boom that happened in Melbourne, as we know. So, and interestingly, reading in the news that they're saying that the City of Melbourne is the fastest growing population rate of any local government area in the nation. And I didn't realise that, but anyway, but also the lowest retail vacancy rate of any capital city. So interesting. So he's actually been the deputy lead of the finance portfolio. He's helped bring council back to surplus in the first time in 5 years. And he's also very active in the planning portfolio. And he's been involved in overseeing the approval of 20,000 new homes, which is really great to see that that's happening. But also his focus has been on the quality of architecture and design across the city and also higher sustainability standards. So we welcome Councillor Rhys as our new Lord Mayor. And wish him well for his time that he's in that role.
Absolutely. Not so sure about that fastest growing stat, because I've heard that about
I
Melton.
was
I've heard that about
surprised at that.
Wyndham. Yeah. Perhaps there's some nuance in there that we're not seeing.
And I was surprised to hear about the lowest retail one as well, but never mind. Look, it has to be said that Sally Capp has done an incredible job in her term as mayor, as a great ambassador for Melbourne. She really has been.
Absolutely, Nick. Now, it's been noted by the press that Nicholas Rhys has yet to say whether he'll be standing for the position in October. He'll be wanting to make every post a winner, no doubt, between now and then, regardless. And we'll see what comes in a few months' time.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he'll be in a probably a strong position, I would suspect, Chris. But who knows what the competition's going to look like.
Well, incumbency usually brings some benefits, doesn't it, in terms of profile? Across to the west, where we've had the outcome of the Melbourne Airport Rail Link mediation. I think this broke very late last week with the federal government appointed mediator determining that an underground station probably wasn't the way to go, that the project needs to happen, and that an above ground station would do the job. The Moonee Valley Mayor, Piers Tyson, and the Brimbank Mayor, Ranka Rassick, have both released statements this week saying now that that's happened, let's get on with it. This is such an important project for both of those municipalities, Melbourne's West in particular more broadly, and of course the city and the state. So the message there is enough's enough. Let's get on with this project and revisit the timeline, which has been blown out by 4 years as per the Victorian state budget recently. Nick?
Yes, so some of the reporting I saw, Chris, suggested that this had cleared the pathway for the development of this rail link. I think that's an overstatement. There's a long way to go. I mean, it is progress. It's a very difficult infrastructure problem. There's obviously some federal pressure coming through, but the state government is going to be the key stakeholder in funding this. There's no doubt about that. And every day we hear news of funding cutbacks, especially in the health space. And I see that as really the critical piece of the jigsaw, and that would seem to me to be some way off, unfortunately.
While we're on rail projects, 3 Melbourne councils, Monash, Whitehorse and Kingston, have expressed their frustrations with the planning process for the Suburban Rail Loop project, particularly in relation to planning for high-rise developments around those new stations. This has been reported in The Age this week. Now, Suburban Rail Loop Authority says that the councils have been involved in I think, 60 hours or more of workshops and have had detailed technical information. But the councils are saying they need more clarity on those plans and more collaboration through this process. Julie?
Yeah, they are actually, Chris. And it's interesting because, the state government are saying that these projects are going to lead to 70,000 new homes and 230,000 new permanent jobs around the railway stations. So there's a significant amount of growth that's going to happen in and around those areas. In actual fact, the new planning rules will apply in precincts stretching 1.6 kilometres from each stop. So that's quite significant. And they're saying that buildings between 18 and 40 stories have been flagged around the station. So this is significant change for those local areas, which will no doubt create quite a lot of concern probably from local residents. And so the councils are expecting to be really strongly involved in these decisions shaping the future of these local areas. So, rightly so, they want to see more detail around this kind of design and level of development. So they're saying that there's a lot of unanswered questions at the moment, particularly around who's going to pay for schools and sports facilities and other essential infrastructure that's going to serve this massive population that's going to sort of double over the next 30 years. So I think it's it's fair to say that they are frustrated and they want more detail around what is going to happen in this, and they definitely want that say for the community.
You can see these becoming election issues as well, can't you, as we move towards October. I notice, Nick and Julie, just in passing, in New South Wales report this week that the housing reforms there that are being introduced, the second stage, has been pushed back. They were meant to be in by last month, but the inference of the reporting I saw was that because of September council elections, a lot of those changes have been pushed back to later in the year, possibly into early next year. How you'd see those as being election issues. I guess you can see how they'd be election issues, but I was a bit surprised to see the brakes put on.
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, Chris. I think that the government are very conscious of council elections and how that can impact on the heightened politics that and the debates that happen during that period. So I'm not surprised to see that. It's probably a wise move, I suspect.
Whether we see some sort of slowdown of a similar nature in Victoria remains to be seen.
No,
we've had
some family members in Sydney will be very pleased to hear about that. They're much affected by those changes in New South Wales, which really are pretty dramatic. They're abolishing heritage rulings and so on in those precincts, which is quite remarkable.
So just to be clear, some of the changes, the reforms have come in, but the ones that are delayed include allowing more terraces, townhouses and small apartment blocks near transport hubs and town centres. So a bit similar to the Victorian concerns about SRL, but on a lower scale by the sounds of it in terms of the types of projects that they want to push through. So, as I said at the top of the show, we've had a council CEO tender their resignation this week. Lucy Roffey at Central Goldfields Shire, been in the role for 6 years. Of course, led that council through a period of administration and the return to elected councillors just a few years back now. And Lucy's picked up a senior role with a Metropolitan Council. I don't think I've seen that role reported in the media just yet, so we might just keep that under wraps, but I know she's pretty excited to be going to this important new role, Julie.
Yes, and well done to Lucy Roffey. She's been a fantastic CEO, as you said, over 6 years at Central Goldfields. What a great job she's had up there, and she's certainly made her mark up there. And the mayor, Councillor Long, has said while she was saddened to receive the Lucy's resignation, she said that her expertise and leadership meant the organisation was well placed for the future. So well done to Lucy Roffey. She's certainly made her mark. She also said that her experience in local government and her financial background provided the organisation with stable and visionary leadership that was needed during an intricate period of transition. So we wish her well. I'm excited she's coming back to Melbourne. That means that I might see her more often, and I'm sure that a lot of the Melbourne CEOs are excited about her coming back to Melbourne as well. But look, fantastic. Well done, Lucy. And another one on our list, Chris, of vacancies to be filled at CEO level.
Yeah, 3 now, 3 sitting there at the moment. This one, there'll be an interim until after the elections, which I think is appropriate given the timing. But I just echo those comments. Lucy's done a terrific job there under, some pretty challenging circumstances over those 6 years at Central Goldfields. I've had the pleasure of working with her and the councillors there on a few projects, and she'll be greatly missed, but she'll bring that expertise to another council, and they'll be the better for it. So before we head off to Canberra, a couple of things we wanted to note. Nick, you picked up on some of these. The survey that's being done through Engage Victoria at the moment. This is going to build the evidence, I guess, base for the development of the regulations under the new governance reforms that have gone through the Parliament.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here, Chris, is stage 1 of a 2-stage consultation process. The regulations that we're talking about are those that will lay out the new model rules, which will apply uniformly across all Victorian councils for councillor conduct, and also the professional development requirements and the mayoral training aspects of the new package. So the survey it's a good one. There's a good discussion paper up there on the website. The purpose of those model rules is clearly outlined as fourfold, and I quite like this summary. It's about behaviours, not ethics. It's about things which are necessary. The rules need to be understood, and then they need to be capable of being enforced so as to drive accountability. And I think that's a good platform. So the survey is about what should be in and what should be out of the model rules. And there's a discussion about the practices and what applies in different councils, what's covered across the state. Obviously, we're talking about things like treatment of others, OH&S. Some councils have got rules about equality, sexual harassment, child safety, cultural awareness, those sorts of things. Then we move into the more governance space, like the basis of decision-making, how that works, how to put meaning around that, which I think is an interesting debate and discussion. Then we're talking about things like use of council resources, gifts, reporting corruption and fraud. Then we get into an area that generates a lot of content for us, which is communications media and social media, the rules for that. So I think it's an interesting exercise, and participation, I strongly encourage it. It's really interesting to look at what the different councils have put into their model rules. There's also some comments about how the mayoral training and councillor training should happen, because that's going to be ramped up under the new regime.
Good opportunity for people to have their say on that, Julie.
Yeah, look, it's great. And I think that, councils need to really engage with this process, because, you'll be able to have a say in what this looks like going forward. So engage as you will, and even think about maybe co-joining with others and putting in a submission. I think it's important to be able to make some comments, particularly in relation to the code of conduct. What I've seen is a whole mixture of codes of conduct, some really, really thin, some really, really long. It'd be nice to be able to see this consistency across the board, but let's make sure it's got all those things in that are really critical. The one thing that I think that that maybe is sort of needed is some commitment to values, as well as to how the group are going to work together, together as a councillor group, as well as with the organisation. So whilst we can have all of these regulatory things in there, I think it's important to also think about, how you're going to work together as a team, which is most important in terms of behaviours.
Good thoughts, all of those. Now, I'm hearing some movement in my ear. I haven't got an earpiece in, but I can just sort of sense that there's some movement in the Canberra studio. So we might just head there in just a moment. Before I do that, Nick, a couple of events coming up you wanted to give a quick plug to that I know Hunt and Hunt are partly involved in.
Yes, indeed, Chris. So Rural Councils Victoria is holding a forum on the 1st and 2nd of August. I believe this is up at Seymour. we are one of the sponsors there, and this is an event that's going to be focused on rural councils looking at what's happening with the forthcoming federal election, and at an overlapping event is also the LG Pro event to be held between Seymour and Yea around about the same date, and so there'll be some useful professional development happening there as well. So those are coming up both on, I think, the 1st and 2nd of August, not far away.
Always good events, and I'm sure the governance reforms and those regulations consultation will be on the agenda for discussion at those events. All right, we might pause there and head off to Canberra for our segment with Rhys Thomas, and we'll come back with much more to talk about shortly with the panel here on TGU. Crossing now live to the VLGA's Canberra studio, where we've got Rhys Thomas, who's on winter recess, you might have noticed from the title. Hello, Rhys, are you there? Come on in.
I am, Chris, and Happy New Year, or Happy New Financial Year, if you want to be technical about it.
Indeed.
It's good to be with you.
I see the scarf. Not cold enough for earmuffs or anything quite yet?
Well, not quite, but hopefully I won't be outside for too long.
So tell me, what are you doing in Canberra?
Well, I'm here in Canberra, obviously, where I'm flying the flag for the members of the VLGA at the Australian Local Government Association's National General Assembly. The Assembly's wrapped up now, but it's been a great program. Following the welcome from country, we heard, first of all, from the Governor-General, Her Excellency Sam Moyston. Now, she only took office on the 1st of July, so this must have been one of her first engagements, and she doesn't need any practice. She knows how to capture the room. So both the government and the federal opposition have addressed the Assembly, and it's pretty clear that issues of financial sustainability for councils are front of mind pretty much for everyone. We had a pretty enlightening presentation from Annabelle Crabb, which is about civic engagement and the nature of politics itself. And perhaps when we've got a bit more time, we can talk about exactly what she shared with us. That was quite interesting. And as always, the highlight was the debate on motions from councils right across Australia. It's a process that really shines a light on the diversity of local government, I think, and how connected they are to their local communities. The issues that councils care about couldn't be more diverse, couldn't be more different, and yet they all have a certain commonality in that they relate to the role of government and how best it can serve its constituents.
It's a fascinating process, that motions process, isn't it? And the people that get up and want to have their say for and against things, and sometimes a few eyebrows raised with the voting.
You do get the odd one, and you get the occasional sort of surprising sort of murmur that goes through the room when a vote doesn't go the way people thought it might.
Yeah.
You also get people who have flown all the way to Canberra just for their 3 minutes in the sun. And they use every little bit of it and try and squeeze it out. And I suppose I'm guilty of that myself today, aren't
I? Yes, but you're taking the opportunity to enjoy some of Canberra's lovely July weather, obviously, with a bit of extra time there, Rhys.
Well, I spoke to someone before I came up here who lives in Canberra, and I said, is it going to be cold up there? And she said to me, well, it's not cold inside. So I think that says a little bit about where Canberra people like to spend this time of the year.
So they have heating there, do they?
They do have the heating on. Yeah, they got the power on some time ago. But I thought I might share with you an answer to a question that I've actually been asked quite a few times. Because when you come to the National General Assembly as a representative of the VLGA, people ask, what is the difference between the ALGA and the VLGA? So the Australian Local Government Association, which everyone calls ALGA, and the Victorian Local Governance Association, which thankfully no one calls vulgar, they're quite different. The G in ALGA stands for government. It's an organisation formed in 1947. It's made up of the statutory municipal associations in every state and territory, except the Australian Capital Territory, which doesn't have local government. Now, of course, in Victoria, that's the Municipal Association of Victoria. So in essence, every Victorian council that's an MAV member is also an ALGA member by default. And in fact, the MAV membership fee includes an ALGA membership fee, which is passed on to them to help support that organisation. So that's why there's lots of Victorian councillors and council executives here this week. Now, although ALGA is independent of the states, its existence does rely on those contributions from the state-based organisations. And those organisations in turn, like the MAV, owe their existence to legislation in each state. So the MAV is governed by the Municipal Associations Act, and that tasks the MAV, or originally tasked the MAV, as a mutual insurance provider and an investment vehicle for local government. Now, of course, the MAV, despite being a legislative body at heart, has expanded from those roles significantly over time and now follows a strategic direction that's set by its board and by the councillors appointed to its state council. But the G in VLGA stands for governance. So we're not tied to a legislative role, which means we can operate independently of government, and we're a membership-based organisation. So we rely on the strength of our membership, and we don't ask councils to formally nominate which councillors participate in our decision-making. All councillors at member councils can stand for election to our board, vote in our elections, and participate in all of our programs and services. We provide support and training to councillors, not only through their organisations, but also directly to them, and in many cases confidentially. We also support council staff who work with councillors, as well as a number of specific communities of practice across areas of local government policy. So probably the easiest way to understand the distinction is to remember the difference in the name. The ALGA and the MAV by extension are about government, whereas the VLGA are about governance. So our independence and apolitical position is what makes us unique.
So you've mentioned, you've been asked the question a few times. Does that explanation set off a light bulb for people, or are they still a bit confused?
I think the penny drops. I think the initial assumption, of course, is that the VLGA is simply the Victorian version of the ALGA. And it's not helped by the fact that in the other states, many of their municipal associations have LGA in their initials. So it's probably more just a historical accident that the VLGA has a very similar name to the ALGA.
Okay, that is interesting, and as you say, the question does get asked quite a bit, so it bears repeating every now and then. All right, well, I know you've got other things that you probably prefer to be doing while you're in Canberra, so Rhys, unless you've got something else, we might give you a leave pass for the rest of this week's show.
No, I've got a bus to catch, Chris, so I'm off.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Rhys. Enjoy your time, and we'll see you back here next week on VLGA Connect.
Thanks.
Great to have Rhys joining us from Canberra. What do you think about his title this week, Julie? The Winter Recess.
Hilarious. I just think that he's got the best name ever to be able to come up with these titles for his segments. So
Yes.
Good on you, Rhys. I hope you're enjoying Canberra. I hope you're staying warm because it's pretty cold in Canberra.
He looked pretty snug in that big scarf that he was wearing. And that question about the difference between the ALGA and the VLGA is an often asked one. So it's about time somebody explained that so clearly and concisely as Rhys did today. Of course, today, as we record this, Friday is the day of the Council of Local Governments. I think a record number of attendees up there today, 750 local government representatives.
Wow.
Before we get back into the story list, a quick note, the VLGA last week launched the 2024 Victorian Councillor Census. Understand all councillors will receive an invite to participate in this, so check your inbox if you haven't already. This is a comprehensive study of over 600 councillors across the state, which will be used to inform policy, funding decisions, sector advocacy. It's confidential and anonymous, and the results will be released as a public research report. So I'm sure we'll be talking more about that in future editions of TGU. So, Julie and Nick, let's have a quick look at some interstate and overseas stories before we wrap up today. Interesting what's going on at Kiama, which has had some struggles in the past few years and under a performance improvement order from the state. This week, the council CEO released a statement saying that she'd referred 3 councillors to ICAC under Section 11 of the ICAC Act, which requires an officer to refer a matter if there's a reasonable suspicion that corrupt conduct has or may occur. And those 3 councillors have been identified in the media. So you probably don't want to say too much about the specifics of this if it's being picked up by ICAC, but interesting to see this process being activated so publicly. Nick, do you think?
Yes, no, it's an interesting one. And the initial report didn't disclose who was involved or really what it was about. It does appear to concern, although I have no details beyond this, development approval for a micro abattoir.
Yeah.
And of the three councillors, two of the councillors Rhys and Keast, have welcomed the scrutiny, which I think is interesting. The third councillor Karen Renkama Lang, she's the councillor who we spoke about a couple of episodes ago in winning a Supreme Court action against the council for a finding against her on the basis of apprehended bias. She won on that basis. She said there was no conflict and no issue. It'll be interesting to see. Just in trying to get a little bit further to the bottom of what this was all about, I did discover that Kiama Council has, in the year-to-date March, so 9 months, spent a grand total of $4.5 million on legal fees.
Wow.
And that's to be compared with the situation 5 years ago, so FY19 for the full year, where they spent the grand total of $220,000. So that's good for the lawyers. That's all I can say about that. I don't know what's behind that huge increase in legal costs.
I suspect a few things, but one of them will be the Bonera aged care facility that they are now, I believe, selling, which was also at the centre of some pretty public media reports a year or so back. So I'm guessing that's probably used up a big chunk of that, but they're pretty startling numbers, aren't they?
They are.
All right, so that's Kiama. The other thing I'd add there about Karen Renkima Lang, she said in the media reports I saw that she found out about the referral through the media, which is a little bit unfortunate to find out that way. Another one that's taking up a lot of media attention at the moment in Townsville, particularly the Townsville Bulletin there, reporting on this virtually every day. The new Mayor, Troy Thompson, who's under investigation by the Crime and Corruption Commission in Queensland over claims that he exaggerated or fabricated military credentials. He returned to work this week after taking some leave, and it's been widely reported that his first action was to remove the media from the council chamber. This has prompted more calls for his resignation. The Premier's expressed disappointment in that action and repeated his call that Mayor Thompson step down. But there's a bit of a twist in the tale here. The acting CEO has clarified that it was a bit of a misunderstanding, that the Mayor was actually exercising the right to demand that recording devices be turned off in the chamber. It was interpreted as removing the media from the chamber, and the acting CEO says those journalists could have stayed in the meeting as it was a public meeting. So it's getting a bit messy, isn't it, in Townsville?
It is getting a bit messy, isn't it? But anyway, interesting story, that one. It's interesting to see what happens.
It will be. And we'll keep you up to date if anything does develop there. Last week, I told you about the New Zealand councillor who made a submission to a neighbouring council that was so offensive it was almost completely redacted. It prompted a complaint from his mayor, the mayor of the council that he is on. We now understand there's been a record number of 24 code of conduct complaints made about this councillor and those actions. Just pretty extraordinary.
The Kiwis, they're top of the pops on this one. It's disappointing to see the lack of civility in the debate, and that's what it's all about. But it's a great story for a certain sort of media outlet to report. So there we go.
Yeah. Yes, and another one is Tauranga, which was dismissed a few years ago. 6 of the dismissed councillors have announced that they are standing again for election, which is coming up later this month. Some people have questioned why you'd want to vote for those councillors that had been removed in the past, but obviously they have the right to stand again. So we'll see how that one pans out later this month, Nick.
Yes, they've been referred to as the malignant 6, which is a wonderful term. Interestingly, one of the people who've been wondering why you might vote for these people again has been the chair of commissioners that has administered the council over the past 4 years. And she's quoted in the press as saying, I wouldn't vote for them.
Yeah.
But it does raise an interesting question. I was a bit surprised by that comment. It does raise a very interesting question when you have councils that are under administration for a period of several 3, 4, 5 years or more, question of inexperience for incoming councillors. And the suggestion, which may be self-serving, is that if the former councillors don't stand, then you'll just have a bunch of completely new and inexperienced councillors. And the suggestion was that they may have the same outcome. But we'll see. That's an interesting comment there.
That commissioner you mentioned had proposed a hybrid transitional governance model, but the local government minister, Simeon Brown, rejected that idea. It seemed like perhaps a sensible approach to getting.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah.
But that's not to be. So as we say, we'll watch that one. A couple of updates from last week before we go. Nick, you've done some research on the North Pole City Council. You didn't believe me when I said Santa Claus wasn't the mayor. I was only half wrong.
Well, Santa Claus indeed has quite a long Wikipedia entry. His name is Santa Claus by Deed Poll. He has been involved in the North Pole Council. He's described on the Wikipedia page, and I wonder who's writing the stuff there, as an American politician, monk, and child welfare activist. So he's got a few tools in his kit bag, and a 5 or 6 page entry when I printed it out on Wikipedia was quite remarkable. I'm not sure, did we find out how many residents there are in? Oh, it did say that he got elected. I think I read somewhere here he got elected initially with 58 votes on a write-in, which is this American concept that people may be familiar with, where he may not be formally on the printed ballot, but you can write in his name. So he initially got elected with a grand total of 58 votes, which tells us a bit about the size of the North Pole City Council. But he's since got his vote up to 100 votes. So well done, Santa. That's all we can say.
Oh,
now, did you say, sorry, Julie, did you say politician, monk, childcare activist, or politician, monk, and childcare activist?
I'm a bit of a comma aficionado, so I always tell the young lawyers that I've just put evaluating comma in what they've written.
I just don't know if a politician monk is a thing or whether he's...
No, I think there's a comma between politician and monk.
Okay, all right. And I was just going to do a little test, if you'll indulge me. Hey, Google, how many... No, Google's not going to play. Oh, yes, it is. How many residents are there at North Pole City Council? No, it does not compute.
Confused.
Sorry, does not compute. All right, we'll look that up later.
Well, it's very, very topical, Chris, because as a lot of people are celebrating Christmas in July, and they're certainly doing that up in Queensland, I can tell you, because we've been to a few places where there's been lots of Christmas decorations. So it's quite interesting. So very, very topical for our viewers to find out a little bit more about Santa Claus.
Absolutely. And one viewer tells us there are peace polls in Geelong. They didn't tell me exactly where, but I'm aware of some peace polls around Geelong. So thank you to that viewer for getting back to us on the peace poll issue that we raised towards the end of last week's episode. So somebody watched all the way through to the end. I think that's the surprising thing there, folks.
That's right.
All right, that's all we have for you this week. Thanks to Rhys Thomas for his insights from Canberra. He'll be back next week, back in the VLGA studio in Melbourne, I assume. Julie, Nick, thank you both as always for your participation in the panel this week. Hope you've got a good week ahead. Oh, well, you have, Julie, because you're... Well,
no, I'm back in Melbourne this weekend, so back to work next week. So... Bye-bye, Sunshine Coast. Hello, cold Melbourne again.
Yeah, we'll save some of that wintry weather for you. And
thank you,
Nick, as always. Thanks to you and the team there at Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for their support for the program.
Thanks indeed, Chris. It was a pleasure to be involved. And next week is my last week before I hand the baton back to Tony Rannick. But we can talk about that next week.
We'll have to do something special.
We will.
On next week's show. All right. Thank you both. Thank you to the viewers and listeners. Thank you to the VLGA and all of the people that help make this thing happen on YouTube and on podcast. We'll see you again for another edition next week. Bye for now.